Conversations with the 100. Glad you're joining us here tonight during this time of, I think, is it Fiesta or what's going on right now? Something like that. So I know a lot of folks are out having a good time. We're glad that you could join us for a short while to talk about voter registration and voter education with two great panelists tonight. First, a little background on the 100 Black Men. The 100 Black Men, we've been here in San Antonio since 1999. We are a community service organization. Our focus is on brotherhood, service, and mentorship. And so we conduct our work in several areas: education, mentorship, leadership development, and health and wellness, all anchored in leadership development. So we're excited to be here. We do a lot of work around high school completion here in the city. We operate a workforce development program. We help young folks get a high school diploma and a workforce credential, and then we help them find viable employment. And then we provide mentorship over the next year. So we're doing some great work that kind of goes along with what we're going to be talking about here tonight, because as we enter adulthood, one of the most important things that we want to make sure that we're participating in is exercising our right to vote. And so we invited two great individuals here with us this evening. We have Ms. Valerie Reifert. She's Executive Director, Reifert or Reifert?
Reifert, you're right. Yeah.
Registrars, and we have Ms. Nicolette Ardiente, the Director of Agents Texans for Justice. And so welcome. Hope I didn't chop those names up too bad. Yeah, welcome. And let's start with Nicolette. Introduce yourself to our listeners tonight. Let them know who you are and about your organization.
Sure, awesome. Glad to be here. Good evening, everybody. My name is Nicolette Ardiente. My pronouns are she, her. I am the San Antonio Regional Director for Asian Texans for Justice. Our organization was founded to be a voice for our state's diverse Asian American Pacific Islander community, to claim our space and inspire Texas to invest in our stories. We envision a future where AAPIs, Asian American Pacific Islanders, are a visible force shaping our state, free from discrimination, marginalization, and oppression. Our mission is to unite our community, train future leaders, and build solidarity across communities to advance equity, social justice, and civil rights. So I'm really excited. In my role here in San Antonio is really to make sure that there's a voice for our AAPI community. And I have a soft spot for actual voter registration and getting people inspired and invigorated about why it's so important to vote. So I'm really happy that I'm on this panel with y'all tonight, especially with my amazing friend, Valerie Reifert, and really to talk about just how important voter education is, not only to how we shape our future, but for the future of our community. Just a little bit more about myself. I'm actually originally from New Jersey. I came down to Texas probably about 10 years ago with my partner. So sometimes Jersey comes out a little bit. I like to say coffee. I like to say draw. And, there's weird accents that most Texans aren't familiar with, but we've made Texas our home. And I'm so inspired and so grateful to be here with you this evening.
Welcome. Thanks for that introduction. Val.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I am Valerie Reifert, and I am a co-founder and executive director at Radical Registrars. We are a grassroots nonprofit organization that was born out of the George Floyd Black Lives Matter protests of 2020. Our mission is to empower, engage, and educate voters through civic education and voter mobilization across Central Texas. And our vision is to create a generation of informed and empowered young, BIPOC, LGBTQ+ folk who vote every single election. We go out into the community and meet our community members exactly where they are, and we get them registered to vote. We tie voting to issues that they care about. We're not afraid to talk about the issues because we don't feel like issues of humanity having to deal with social justice and healthcare and stuff like that. We don't consider those to be partisan or political issues. So we will talk about those issues and tie it to voting to let our community know, like, this is why you should be voting. If you care about this, make sure you're voting because it affects everything, fortunately or unfortunately. So we got to make sure we're voting. So that's what we're doing, going around and doing voter registration and civic education. We are actually the only group right now at the Bexar County Jail doing civics classes currently. I go in there twice a month to educate the currently incarcerated on civics and their voter eligibility.
Wow, that's powerful stuff. Thank you for that introduction. Yeah, and I didn't realize that. So awesome, great work. Often the formerly incarcerated are kind of forgotten group that come out and not realizing what their rights are. Many feel that they've lost those privileges forever. So
yeah, they're told that. I call it a hood rumor. It's something that's gone around forever and ever, that people are told that if they have a felony on their record that they can never vote again. And it's absolutely not true. As soon as somebody is off papers, they can get registered to vote and vote. It actually says it twice on the voter registration card. So it's just a rumor that I am just dead set on dispelling and just getting out of here. It's just completely not true. And we need those people to vote because judges are elected officials, and those people actually get to see how judges really act. We, on the outside, we only see what they campaign on. When you go on the inside, you get to see if they're keeping those promises that they've campaigned on. So it's just something that we just find very important, especially right now with judges being up for election currently.
So what you're saying is we need to read that voter registration card. Right? Because I'm notorious for just filling stuff out and not reading it. So
yeah.
Awesome. So let's dig into it a little bit. I'll give each of you maybe 3 to 5 minutes just to give us an overview, a more in-depth overview of your organization, the work that you're doing here on the ground and probably around Texas. And so whichever one would like to start first, I'll let you have the floor.
Val, you go first. Because I went first already.
Yeah, so Radical Registrars, like I said, our main focus is on voter registration and civic education. So we are at the Bexar County Jail doing classes twice a month, letting the currently incarcerated know about civics and just breaking it down. I tell them, one of the first things I say is this is a safe space. Voting has been made to seem like it's something that is only for older people or super educated people, or let's just be frank, white people. And so I just break it down in just very easy to understand terminology and language, and just have it be a super safe space for people to ask questions because you don't know what you don't know. So yeah, that's what we're doing. We go, today we were at St. Philip's College at their Culture Fest. We really try not to reinvent the wheel. There are so many events that go on in San Antonio already where hundreds and thousands of people will go. And so we try to go to those events that are already going on and just kind of normalize talking about voting and voter registration, just being something that's year-round on top of people's minds. A lot of people don't realize that there are elections that go on actually every year. Last year in 2021, we had the constitutional amendments election, and then also our city council was up for election earlier in the year, and then they'll actually be back on the ballot again next year. And so there's elections going on all of the time and people aren't realizing it. And something that I let the community know, one thing is if you check any one of these boxes, if you are young, if you are a Black or brown person, Indigenous person, a person of color, if you are queer, and if you are a woman, if you check any one of those boxes, laws are made to regulate you. And if you are not participating by voting, then you're quite literally letting people who don't really care about those communities too much make decisions for you that affect your everyday life, that affect your health, that affect who you can marry. There were even Republicans talking about interracial marriage being brought back up to the state's decisions. And that'd be something that would affect my life. My husband happens to be a white man. So yeah, just really a focus on just educating the community on what's going on and trying to bring people in instead of them, running away because it's something that maybe they haven't seen done before, kind of showing them like, hey, anybody can do this and you actually should be doing this. And let me tell you why.
Thank you for that. A lot to unpack there. And
a lot.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, it cut out for a second.
Yeah, you did cut out for a little bit.
What was the last thing you said, Mr. Harris?
Oh, yeah, I was just saying a lot to unpack there. And then I said, we'll come back around to that. And so you're up.
Thank you. So really going off of everything that Valerie just said is spot on, especially for, Black, Indigenous, people of color. We know that there are systems in place that are designed to make sure we don't vote, and they continue to make sure that we don't vote. Well, we just saw this past election around with SB1 being implemented. We disenfranchised voters of all different communities, of all different ages, of all different, like, just their access to the voting polls. That's not something we need to be taking away from folks at this time, especially when there's so much literally within our hands that we have control over. Thinking about this election and going into even our November election, we have the power to change the entire executive office here in Texas, from our governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general, all the people that are supposed to be making our lives easier. They're literally on the ballot. So that's why we need to invigorate folks to actually come out and vote. Speaking on behalf of Asian Texans for Justice, a lot of the work that we do when we're out in the community, especially doing voter registration, especially just being advocates in the community, showing up, is showing folks that as an Asian American person, like, your vote matters. We are culturally and most traditional, like, families growing up, they don't talk about voting. It's something of, oh, only the elders can only talk about it. I myself, I grew up where both my parents may have voted, but they kept that as a secret from me. They didn't tell me why it was so important. It wasn't until I was much older as an adult, grown and living on my own, that I realized, hey, no, I have the power to change something with my single vote. And this is why I need other people to feel that same way. And I will share the last time we had like a really big voter registration event was actually in September of last year. We were on UTSA campus, and I was able to create like really good relationships with the Asian Greek groups on campus, and also different Asian ethnicity groups like the Filipino Student Association, the Vietnamese Student Association. And honestly, they were just so surprised to see somebody who looked like them actually talking about voting. And I tell myself, like, I wish somebody in my life when I was growing up was telling, who looks like me or of Asian descent, was even saying like, hey, you need to vote because all of these things are happening, and they're happening around you. And if you don't vote, it's not, you have no voice in that. If I had somebody telling me, I probably would have been doing this eons ago, probably as soon as I got out of high school. And that's what I want people to see, especially in our work in the AAPI community, is seeing someone who cares about their vote and cares about their future, to say, hey, this is why you need to vote. And all these people are doing X, Y, and Z against you. What are you going to do about it? And lastly, I'll even just say, like, as being a daughter of immigrants and a woman of color, like, I noticed, as I've said before, is that there are systems in place making sure that I don't vote, making sure my community or my friends and family even in different states too, they may have other different like voter suppression techniques on them, but it's just like, this democratic system is not a hobby. It's not a hobby for us. We need to fight for our rights to vote. And unfortunately in 2022, and we need to make it a better place by making sure all of our family, friends, communities are getting out to vote and making the change that they want to see, not just because other people of higher status, higher economic, on the socioeconomic level can make that happen. We can make it happen when we work together.
Yeah, that's powerful. And so circling back around, we were talking about oppression and voting tactics, and a comment was made that if you check, Val, in your comment when you were talking about, if you check one of these boxes and you gave us a list of scenarios, and then your closing statement was, laws are made to regulate you.
Yeah,
that's pretty powerful. Can both of you elaborate a little bit on that as it relates to voting and why that's so important?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I pointed out earlier, how a Republican lawmaker said just a few weeks ago how he thinks that interracial marriages should be something that the states decide on. Like, that's something that's being discussed in 2022, when this is something that I believe was resolved in like the 60s or 70s. So it's just that it's, what's going on in Texas and in Florida. It's like they're trying to have a worst state contest in my eyes, with the way that they're governing. But it's just blatant attacks on women, communities of color, and on young people, and on queer people, on the queer communities. And it's just, there's so many actual real problems that are going on, like our power grid situation here in Texas. Like climate change, like there are real actual issues going on. And yet our elected officials are deciding to attack trans children and their families, and potentially attack, marriages and all that. So it's just very important that, we are paying attention, especially now, because these things are happening like literally in the wee hours of the night are these decisions being made. And then we're waking up in the morning and then just seeing them, as you're opening up your phone and you see your news feed on the side, it's telling you that these laws were passed. Like in Texas, especially in 2020, nearly 11 million Texans voted in 2020, a number that Texas had never seen before. And instead of, and that was because of the accessibility of voting due to COVID. And then for lawmakers then in 2021 to make voting more difficult and less accessible, targeting specific communities, being, the working communities, the disabled communities, now they're removing accessibility to vote, like with drive-through polling locations, with the 24-hour polling locations. It's just a blatant attack for voting working too well, which doesn't make any sense. I literally said that to a group of children. I was like, voting worked too well. Somebody was like, what do you mean it worked too well? And we were just sitting there looking at each other because I couldn't tell her why, because it just really doesn't make any sense. But I also think that's what keeps Nicolette and I going, because we know like what we're doing is working. Our efforts are working. They wouldn't be moving the goalpost and making things more difficult if, what we were doing wasn't going to be successful. So more hoops and hurdles, just like our ancestors, but we'll keep jumping through them and making things happen.
That and finding better ways to resolve it, right? Like
yes.
We know that especially even in the age of technology, we've gotten better at messaging. We've gotten better at outreach. We've harnessed the power of social media to work in our benefit, right? Just the sheer amount of like reposts and shares and stuff like that, really, it catches people's eye, and they continue to spread that because they know that this problem unfortunately isn't going to go away easily, right? We know that it's gonna take time, but that's why we need to push on these elected officials who are empowered to serve us. Remember, they're public servants for a reason. It's not the other way around where, they should be like, we should be praising them for being elected. No. It should be that they should be praising us for getting them elected, trusting them to put in the laws and everything that we need to be successful American citizens right now. I mean, even going off of like what Valerie said, just thinking about SB1 and the voter suppression, we saw just the flurry of rejected mail-in ballots here, and not only in San Antonio, but just Bexar County as a whole. I've got some statistics actually from the Texas Civil Rights Project, where here in Bexar County, we had 22% of the actual rejection rates of the mail-in ballots. So think about that's almost 3,000, 4,000 ballots that were rejected. People were not able to vote because of SB1, because of the small print on the mail-in ballot, the flaps, the way that it was supposed to, where you were supposed to sign it before you, like all these crazy instructions. And we know that mail-in ballot works. Like we know that mail-in voting works because that is a sure way. Once you apply, you're good for the entire year. You don't have to worry about, oh, well, am I going to get no, they send it to you. And with that even being said, like the ones that did get rejected, how many of them do you think they actually were able to reach out to those folks and say, hey, we need you to cure your ballot? Thinking about all these, especially our elderly folks who are they're not accessible. They can't come out of their homes. Maybe they're immunocompromised. They can't always come out. Maybe they go to the bare elections. Maybe they don't have even transportation to make sure that they can cure their ballots. Like I fielded calls from people that were saying, I can't make it. And I would try, well, can I bring you to the bare elections? I'm not supposed to go outside. I'm not medically cleared to do this. So you hear these horror stories of folks that they trust in mail-in ballot, like they trust in voting by mail, and this is what happens to them. This is what happens to people like who trust the system and just want to make sure that but how can they do it if they just don't have the access? I mean, voter accessibility, we've seen all throughout the state, like it's different. There are different sides of town that have the struggles and maybe not the struggles, but we can't treat it on a majority or like we can't treat it like, oh, well, this part of town is okay and not this side. No, it needs to be an equitable process throughout the entire state. We need everybody to have equity, and especially when it comes to voting, and those rights should not be taken away.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, all those are great points. And there's a comment that popped up in the chat. Let me see what up. There's an election coming up May 7th to elect community college trustees. How important is it to vote for people that make decisions on educating our youth? That's from the audience.
Extremely.
Right now, like it's so like right now, these not only are they're not only community college trustees, but they're also like school board trustees, right? So these are the folks that are helping teachers and educators and administrators to figure out the curriculum and how to combat these crazy laws that are trying to take away actual history, like, and books off of our students' shelves. Like, the people that we elect into these spots need to understand, especially of the community, what they want to see. Especially they need to hear from the teachers. They need to hear from the parents. They need to hear from the educators who are working in these systems. They can't be folks who, oh, well, I just want to run for office because it'll look great on my resume. No, that should not be the precedent that we set up for especially school board officials who will help dictate the shape of our Texas education system, especially here in Bexar County. So yes, very.
Yeah, there was actually a candidate in Williamson County, so up near Austin, named Robert Moreau, who got, I think, 30,000 or so votes. The picture that he submitted to the League of Women Voters Guide was him in a clown hat. And then his answers were just disturbing, shocking, disgusting, like quite literally the answers that he submitted to why he should be on the school board of education was that nobody loved watermelon-sized titties the way that he did. And then there were more shocking, ridiculous answers on there. But this guy, this white man, got like 30,000 votes. He's even gone into runoffs before from either people not voting informed and just picking the less offensive name, like Robert Moreau. That doesn't, that sounds like a good guy. Yeah, he's like actually ridiculous and crazy and just bored and just runs for office all the time. But yeah, it's extremely important because there's an attack on children right now, young people, checking that box. And then especially the queer children and the children of color, like Northeast Independent School District is the district that I grew up going to in San Antonio. And quite literally, when I would lead Black History Month lessons, would the kids in my class tell me, sorry, you were slaves. Sorry, my family owned you as slaves. And so it's just ridiculous for people, especially locally, to be talking about critical race theory or anything, because clearly the right message isn't getting across after a Black history lesson if children are coming to the only Black kid in their class and saying something ignorant like that. So the fact that people are even in an uproar about, like, you should be mad on the other end about what the children are getting taught. Like, they're not being taught anything that is truly about compassion, caring, and kindness. They're just being empowered to be worse. And so now for these, parents and people to be running for the school board and stuff and wanting books and stuff taken away from children, wanting children not to be able to learn and explore and get smarter, it's just very telling, because who wouldn't want their child to be educated?
Yeah. A lot of the work that we do involves schools, and I'm at a juncture now where we're just, when you take a step back and look, the public education system is not meant to educate our children. It's really meant to indoctrinate them. to give them a certain mindset based on what we call that single narrative. And that single narrative is really a Eurocentric white male narrative.
Mhm.
You know, this is what we want you to know based on the history that we're telling you. And what we know now is much of that history is inaccurate. But now, and this is why I feel voting is so important, and why I wanted you all to come on, because the Texas legislature is mostly white and male, right? And so they are making all of these choices. If you ask them to pass legislation that I think Nicolette mentioned earlier, that makes it easier to vote, no, we can't do that. But in a matter of weeks, they call special sessions and pass legislation to ban teaching, critical race theory in schools. And so talk to us about how can voting change these things?
Yeah, I mean, it's just really about getting people in office who want the truth to be taught, who want real history to be taught, who who are wanting those things. It's these people and who are running for office who are the ones who are really like, I don't know. I feel like I'm going off topic. Nicolette, you can take this one. I'm sorry. I feel like I feel like I'm going somewhere else with this.
No, you're fine. I mean, honestly, when I even think about it too, is like these people that run for office, a lot of the time they may even discredit those that are younger, right? They want to say, oh, well, you're not old enough to run for office or something like that. We all have different lived experiences, and being as a woman of color, like my lived experiences have shown me like, yes, this is more deserving of my community. Like, this is why, I need to see a diverse leadership, especially if I'm starting a new job, right? I don't need to go in, for instance, like go into an interview and every single person is a white man, right? As a young Asian woman, I'm going to be like, what's going on here? Like you can't even have a diverse panel to have leaders question like who would be onboarded. So in that same instance, we think about like the diversity that we just expect of our elected officials and the people that we put in power. Like it should be a diverse group of people, and they should also have those different lived experiences to say, hey, like this is not, like what's happening right now is not good. Like we need to think outside of the box, and I need support from people in the community to say, hey, like we need to rally behind this individual to run for office, or why these ideals are important to our community. And maybe it's not even just somebody running for office. Maybe it's an initiative, right? Maybe it's something put on the ballot in the sense of like propositions. Maybe it's something that we need to fund. We need to take it to city council. There are ways that we can really lean on people in the community to make this stuff work. And it needs to be diverse, people of color at the forefront leading it, and voters in our community really needs to see that happen. We can't keep on seeing the same white men in power making these decisions for us, or thinking that they're making decisions for us in their best. It's in their best interests. We cannot keep this mindset where our public officials have all this power. We own that political power. They cannot take it away from us. Just like maybe they can be elected for 2 years. You do something wrong against the community, we'll remember that because we're going to vote somebody else in. We're going to find somebody who's more compassionate, more willing to serve the community in that spot, because you're not deserving of it. Again, the political power belongs to us. We need to vote so that way, we change the trajectory of Texas and beyond, because we know what happens in what starts here in Texas tends to spit out, right? We see like different states and that actually adopt the same ideals, and we have this lofty like aura about Texas, right? In Texas, everything is bigger, and that's the same thing. The attitude's bigger, the power is bigger, and we can make it all happen when we work together.
Absolutely. I think I tell people that our electorate is a direct reflection of who is voting. And if you're not seeing yourself reflected in our electorate, that means that your community is not showing up and voting. And the only people who are going to change that is us, because there are like-minded people out there. There are people who want to run for office, not just for the popularity, not just for the, like the clout or whatever that it brings you.
Political
But there
clout.
are people, yeah, but there are people who really do care about making changes, about making a positive difference. And then there are people who are just trying to maintain the status quo and to make sure that, nothing ever really changes, and so it's just a direct reflection of who is showing up and voting. That's something that I ask the jail population. I ask them who has seen a judge, and they'll all raise their hand. And I ask them, did your judge look like you? Everybody will put their hand down. Did you get the outcome that you wanted? Nobody's hand goes up. And so there is something to say about, when a judge is a reflection of you, when they, potentially have had the same lived experience as you, when they can see themselves in you. And we can say this for the negative, like with Kyle Rittenhouse, like with that other, that swimmer that was a rapist or whatever at that university, like that judge saw something in them that wanted them, to take leniency on those people. And, like who's to say, that wouldn't be the same thing. And, somebody seeing, a young Hispanic man, a young Black woman, and them seeing a judge that looks like them and being like, you know what, because somebody, had mercy on me, because somebody, understood where I came from is why I'm here today. And so why can't I give you that opportunity as well? And so it's just on us as, people who are voting to go out there and vote these people in to represent us.
Yeah, that's powerful. The collective capital of all of our vote, right? That has impact. But how do we? What I hear a lot is that, hey, I only have one vote. It don't really matter. How do we get past that?
You got to do it because, okay, so let me try to put this in a PC way. All white folks, and I mean like 60s, 70s, 80s, nobody is having to convince them to go out and vote. They go out and vote because they know it works. They know that it's something that they're supposed to do. And they know that when they do it, they'll get what they want. And these are people who have, like, let's say 5 to 30 years left. Who knows how they taking care of themselves? But like young people who literally have their whole lives ahead of them and we're like, nah, I'm gonna sit this out. It's not gonna matter. If the old people are doing it so fervently, like you should be doing it like just as fervently. So it's just definitely like changing that mentality, like, and two, everything around voting, like I get it. To some people, it's like opening up a Bible. Their head's gonna go down, their eyes are gonna close. They start getting real tired or real sleepy or real bored thinking about voting. And so, like what Nicolette and I do, especially when we are out, like face to face with people, like we give them energy and we give them, like the real talk, like why you should be voting. Like, I'm not afraid to be like, yo, one of the candidates said they're going to legalize marijuana. Like, come on, like, is this what you want? Is this what the community wants? Like, let's do this. We're all in this together, I thought, so it's just really about, letting young people know, like, quite literally from even like 18-year-olds in high school who are now the books that they check out of the library, now their parents are going to know what they're checking out, like just taking that layer of like privacy and the ability to just like learn and read from them by telling their parents, like, this is stuff that is directly affecting, like, from the youngest of the electorate, like all the way up to their parents. So it's just really just emphasizing to the communities, like the only real way to see change is by participating. And when you get started younger, the change will start coming sooner. When you're only voting every 4 years, you're never going to feel change like when you're voting locally. Our city council quite literally just voted to raise everybody's electricity bill by $5 starting on the 1st. Everybody's bill just went up by at least $5. Our city council voted on that. That's something that affects process literally every single month. And like I said earlier, city council will be up for election again next year. And then there were 3 people who voted to not raise the bill. One of them, we don't know why he did it. He don't usually vote for progressive things like that, whatever. But the other 2 people who voted for us to not raise our rates were the 2 young people of color on city council who voted to not raise our electricity bill. So it's all about who we are putting in, and it's just a direct of what we'll get out of it. And so, yeah, that's why we should be voting, especially the younger, the better.
Right. And even with that being said, is like, we've seen it for decades, right? In history books, it's been always white men in power. And the only way to change that is to bring up all our young people of color, like out in the community, to make that. It's not going to happen overnight. Like, as much as we would love for it to, we need people to step up. We need people in leadership positions that are BIPOC. They are of LGBTQ. They identify as LGBTQ. They may have, they may be multiracial. They may have like different, just different lived experiences, but that's why we need them to show up and actually run for office, so that way we can continue it moving forward. It's not going to take just maybe 1 or 2 like people of color. No, we need to keep garnering that same like just pizzazz and just wow, like look how amazing all the candidates that are out on this ballot, they're all people of color, right? They're all young people of color. That would be another thing. Like you can literally see yourself in the ballot, knowing that you're being represented. That is exactly, we need to carry that train forward, right? We think about voting rights because we care about our voting rights really more. It's because it's our basic tenet of our democracy. It's the bare minimum that we should expect from our government, right? That's our freedom right there. They should be making it easier for us to vote and finding other people to actually get on the ballot, and we can vote them in. When I think about like just the history that we've had, we can't go back to that. It's not worthy of our time. It's not worthy of the progress that we need for our community. And for myself there, this past election, I saw so many Asian candidates on the ballot, not only here in San Antonio, but in Austin, in Dallas. And I was like, wow, like they're rallying together. Some folks didn't make it, some folks did, but it's all about, we got to keep trying. We got to see folks that are vulnerable who want our vote and be like, you know what, I trust you because I align with your values and I want to see the progress that you're going to do for our community. That's how we're going to get them to caring and continue this momentum of actually a representative government that looks like us.
And so I believe we have an election coming up in May. I believe around May 7th, I believe. Two
elections.
Okay. Tell us about that. Tell us about those.
Sure. So the first one is going to be, I think that was mentioned in the chat, is the May 7th one is for our municipal school board. There's a couple bonds that are going to be on that ballot as well. You can get more information on, for those here locally in San Antonio, there's Bear Elections will have that sample ballot hopefully out in the next week or so. It's not ready yet. And then we'll have our primary runoff. So those individuals who did not make that 50% mark during the March primaries, they duke it out with the second other person. So that way they fight for their vote. That's literally, that's a last chance opportunity. So there's several races on both, I believe the Democratic ballot and also the Republican ballot that folks can vote for. And really it's do or die at that point, because if they don't make it, they will not make it to the November general election, which is the big mamma jamma of why we need to get every single person out to vote. Again, like I said, it's everybody from the top of the ticket, top of the state executive branch, from the governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general, all the folks that should be making our lives easier. What's it called? The General Land Commission. So especially for those here in San Antonio, they help dictate the Alamo. Our pride and our pride jewel here in the Alamo City is our Alamo. So like thinking about all these folks who have that direct correlation to us as voters. And as Val mentioned, like if you vote only once every 4 years, yeah, you're voting for the president, but think about how much the president has to do in order to affect your life. With these midterm elections right now, these are the folks that are literally going to touch your life every single day. They dictate the future because we're putting them in power. And so with that being said, it's like the closer, like with this midterm election, it really is, it's really critical that we have everybody come out to vote, because these are the people that should be making our lives easier.
Yeah, these are the people who are going to make our lives easier and where we'll actually like feel the change, like feel stuff happen sooner. So yeah, that's why it's just really important to get involved and get involved now. Like this is such a big year for Texas. Like we have this amazing opportunity on our hands to like really change the landscape of what's been Texas for like literally ever. While we're talking about the primary, I love to point out, Nicolette pointed out the land commissioner, like there's just so many races that we don't even think about, like they literally slip through the cracks, like the land commissioner who has something to do with the Alamo. But then there's also the railroad commissioner that's on the ballot this year, who has absolutely nothing to do with the railroad and has been over 100 years. What the railroad commissioner actually does is regulate the oil and gas industry. And they also decide where the toxic waste is put, which is usually around communities of color, and that's environmental racism. And so like what's going on in Flint, Michigan with their water crisis, that's from years of toxic waste being dumped and dumped and dumped, and that's what happens. And so I don't know what Flint, Michigan's railroad commissioner is called, but ours is called the railroad commissioner. It's been Republican controlled forever. That's another reason why the name has not changed in forever, because how difficult would it be to just call the position what it is, which is an oil and gas commissioner? But no, it's the railroad commissioner, because I know for me, like when I was younger and voting, I would see that like, what the hell is that? I guess, and like keep it moving. And then when I found out what it was, I'm shocked. I'm appalled. Like I need to use my gossip power for good and let everybody know, like, y'all, railroad commissioner is now railroading, like just get the word out there. So there's, and on that thought though, with like how to vote, especially with the primary, there were so many candidates. There are so many candidates on the ballot, especially when it comes to our primary elections. And a lot of people don't know, especially the younger generation, you cannot rely on your phone. You cannot have your phone in there looking up candidates while you're voting. But what you can do is take a voter guide from the League of Women Voters, which is located at every library location. Or you can literally have your answers written down beforehand and take a piece of paper in there with your answers already written down. Like you can vote informed, you can take information with you. And a lot of people don't know that. I don't know why, like it's not being screamed from a mountaintop about the voter guides. Like this year, for the primary election, we were out doing parties at the polls. So I was out with signs and with a banner and like candy and just fun stuff at the polls. Like one, to show young people like, hey, we're out here. You're supposed to be out here. Yes, this is what you should be doing, but also out there giving out over 400 voter guides from the League of Women Voters. There was one point when the entire line at Lions Field, everybody had a voter guide in line, and I guess they were using them outside and the line was going a little bit slow and somebody got mad. I'm like, this is a marathon, not a sprint. People are actually allowed to and able to sit here and know exactly who these people are and what they stand for and be able to make their choice informed. And so I think that's a really important piece to get out there, and hopefully people will leave with, is like, you don't have to go in there blind. And, I get, if you don't want to do your research beforehand, then get yourself a voter guide and go in there, and it's an open book test, and just go ahead and sit there and thumb through it one at a time until you're finished.
And I'll just even say to that effect, so Val did honestly, she did amazing, like all the different voting sites, all the sweet like signs and all the swag that she was giving up. I, on the other hand, was an election judge, so we couldn't do that part. But with that being said, is like we had folks coming in with their sample ballots, with voters guides, with the necessary materials that hey, I did my research, I did my homework. And also, there are other groups around town, they may be partisan, they may be nonpartisan, but they also provide their endorsed candidates. For instance, I'll just mention Stonewall Democrats. They also do one. And that way it also aligns with LGBTQIA plus community, right? These are folks that they've vetted through. They've done a candidate form. They ask them the hard questions about what are you going to do for our community, so and so forth. And, people brought those in, and it made my heart gleam because I saw people voting informed and honestly taking it so seriously, because these are, again, the people that are supposed to make our lives easier. So just good work all around.
Yeah, that's good stuff, because a lot of folks don't know. I go in there, I wish there was somebody I could just call and say, hey, I don't know who to vote for. Who should I vote for? But I know it don't work like that. Boy, that would be easier. And so
You could call me.
I was about to say, you can call
Off the
any of
record,
us.
you can call me. Yeah.
and with the changes that's coming up, are there any changes to the voting process that our listeners should be aware of
Changes within-
from last year, or anything that we should know about?
I would say the biggest thing is the photo ID. You need to make sure you have valid photo ID. There is, if you don't have photo ID, there's a nonpartisan group called Vote Riders. They can assist individuals with getting actual voter qualifications. So I'm gonna I know it's not gonna do it justice, but this is their actual card, Vote Riders. And on the back of it, just because they're a nonpartisan group and they do it statewide, or I'm sorry, nationwide, they do it specifically for Texas. They'll say like, hey, this is what you need to bring when you go vote. If you don't have that, they can either cover the cost to make sure that you can get some type of form of identification, or help you obtain those documents. So that way you can get your information. Again, it's a nonpartisan group, amazing work that they're doing all around the nation. And they just use grants as money. They use donations to make this work possible, but they're out there in the community trying to make sure that people, at least you show up to the polls, make sure you have the right ID to do so.
Yeah, there is actually an election ID that you could get at when, like, where DMV, DPS, a DMV, like when you're applying for your license, like there's an election license that you can actually get. But yeah, I don't like changes wise. Yeah, like with the IDs, it's definitely that you want to make sure that you have a good ID, but also like there are some caveats, right? So if you are 70 or older, your ID could be expired actually. You can use an expired ID if you're over 70 years old. Those who have concealed handgun licenses can use those. And this is something that I point out in the civics class that I do at the jail, because when you look at the IDs that are allowed and what IDs are left off, again, like that's something that's just very specific, like with, handgun owners being able to use that license to vote, but yet students who go to a state college can't use their college ID to vote. Like, isn't that a state issued ID? So, but then when you think about who college students are, and what those demographic makes up, and then the demographic makeup of those who have the concealed handgun license, you can very much see, who's getting that favor, when it comes to that. So it's just really just making sure you're ready. Just a little bit of preparation when it's time to vote can go a long way. And then Nicolette said how she's an election judge. That's definitely something else that people of color should get involved with, because first of all, you get paid. We're not over here working these elections for free.
It's not free.
But also it's good to see somebody who looks like you. Like anywhere you go, it is just nice to see somebody who just look like you, somebody you can look at and just know that they know. And so, like definitely be an election worker. It could actually be a family affair as well, because if you're an election judge like Nicolette gets to choose who she has clerking for her during the election. And so it can definitely be a family thing. A lot of quality time. Y'all gonna be in there for a whole almost
whole
like
day,
10
whole
hours.
week,
Yeah.
whatever
Exactly.
your shift really is. And even to that point too, like, thanks for bringing that up, Val, is the fact that like this happens for the most part every single election. And once you are like an election judge or a clerk, they'll continue to call you every single election. So that's money. Like, with that being said, I just checked my mail and I got my paycheck from Bear Elections, because it's been over a month, but still I just got paid from doing my election duty on election day. And with that being said, they do need more people. They need younger people, tech savvy people, those who can speak multiple languages. Like, lucky for me, I mean, I can also translate in Tagalog, which is the native language of the Philippines, but there's not that many Filipinos, to be honest. But I honestly saying that, like, having bilingual speakers is a huge plus, especially in all sides of town, just statewide. Just being a bilingual election worker helps out.
Yeah, and so great stuff. Now, you all mentioned the voting guides that you can get at libraries and things like that, because it's so true. When we go into the the voting booth, most of the time, you know nothing about those folks that's on the ballot. You know, outside of the guide, how do, you know, one, how do we motivate ourselves to want to know more about the candidate? But how do we find out who these folks are and what they represent? You know, so often I always say, you know, Republican, Democrat, two sides of the same coin. You know, they all in part. It's like lawyers. When you go to court, the lawyers are in it together. They talking to each other. They making deals. Two sides of the same coin. So how do we know who, you know, what these folks are really about before we go and vote for them?
Yeah, that's the hard part. Is, you know, like paying attention, especially like when it's a primary and there's literally hundreds of people on the ballot. You know, but there are, you know, groups like, you know, radical registrars who are out here, you know, like giving you information like where we can. We try to present it in a nonpartisan way for now until we get our C4 arm and we can be a little more direct. But, you know, like I said, you know, with the League of Women Voters, with the voter guides, there's vote411.org. You know, you can check the candidates out as well. But, you know, just like I said, like a little bit of preparation and just studying up on these candidates, and, you know, just seeing where your values align. I believe Jolt did a vibe check this past year with the candidates, just, you know, kind of seeing like, you know, like where it fit. And I know for radical registrars, like in the future, we want to do a voter guide that's just very simple, you know, yes, no, decline the answer, and then you can see where this person's values align with yours. But yeah, I agree, you know, it's definitely not about the party all the time, but it is about the person and what they're saying and what they're representing. But especially when it comes to judges, like that's something where you can like look up their record and see, you know, like if they are, you know, if they're fulfilling what their campaign promises, you know, like that's something that can be researched, but it does just take some care and some preparation.
Yeah, with those resources, especially like Val's voter guides and everything like that, there are groups that, you know, go out of their way. They also host candidate forums. They also host like meet and greets. And I will say, like for this past primary, I believe both the Democratic and the Republican parties, they were also hosting candidate forums or candidate meet and greets. So that way the community can come out and meet all the candidates on the ballot. Like for instance, here in San Antonio, right, our district clerk, there were like 7 Democratic candidates on the one. And it's like, how are you supposed to decide? You have to meet all 7 of them? I don't know. But it's the point of it is that they're trying to find different ways, different mediums to get out to the community and say, hey, these are our candidates on our ballot. Like this is whom you should meet. I will say, like for us, Asian Texans for Justice, we are personally working on a candidate forum for different API candidates up and down the ballot. So we're going to try to have them, you know, reaching out to different communities and making sure that they have API issues on the forefront. And again, like I said, it's making sure that these entities are doing justice by creating candidate forums, just ways to meet the candidates. And it works 2 ways too, right? Our candidates should also be out there in the community asking for your vote. It shouldn't, like the first time you hear of a candidate should not be the time when you're going to vote for them, right? Like it's unfortunate because that happens to some folks, but it has to work both ways, where not only are there organizations to make it happen, but also the candidates are doing their due diligence and saying, hey, there's an opportunity for you to vote for me. This is why you should learn more about me.
Yeah, and then there's also, I think it's called Alamo City Agenda now, with Eric Velasquez, and he interviews candidates like from not just Democratic and Republican, but also he'll do like Green Party, Libertarian Party, and those candidates, Independent Party as well. And so there are people who are out here doing the work. It does just take finding them and staying plugged in, but it's definitely not impossible. To answer the questions that popped up in the chat, though, I'm typing in the election protection number, which is 866-OUR-VOTE, 1-866-687-8683 for, and this answers the question of if you're registered to vote, but you get to the polls and they tell you that you're not registered. Nicolette's an election judge, so she could speak on that a little bit more, like the difference between a provisional ballot and then fighting to do a regular ballot. But definitely 866-687-8683 is the number to know if you feel like something's funky going on at your polls.
Mhm. And with that being said, if like you are, you are registered and you have checked that you are registered, your election judge should be doing everything in their power to make sure your vote gets counted. You get to vote, whether it is provisionally or if it's like a limited ballot, just depending on the time frame too of the election. That has happened a lot too, though. There have been folks that they thought they were registered to vote, but they actually weren't. And so they were not able to vote at all, unless they wanted to do a provisional vote, which we can go into the minute details of those, but that's also another process. I hate, honestly, I hate when that happens to any voter, because it's almost like we're already disenfranchising them right there, just saying, oh, well, you're not registered to vote. Well, why? Like people, it goes back to this, we have a solution to this. It's making sure people are informed to vote, making sure they can access their sample ballot, saying, oh, am I actually registered? What if you didn't remember that, or you thought you changed your address and you changed your voter registration maybe a year or two ago, but it actually didn't go through? If you don't follow up on it, unfortunately, if you don't follow up on it, that's it. Like they're not going to go out of their way to make sure that you, Mr. Milton Harris, already updated your voter registration because you moved X amount of months ago. No, they won't do that. We have to do that. It's a slimy process, to be honest, because that's our right. Our right is to vote, and they should be doing everything in their power to make sure that we can vote. And even to that point is just saying, like, you have to vote informed. You should access your sample ballot to know whom you're voting for, and making sure that you are registered to vote, so you don't get into that conundrum when you're at the polling site and you're giving them your ID to find you and they can't find you because you just are not registered to vote. That shouldn't happen to anybody.
Right. And especially in Texas, where we cannot register to vote online, and where like you can't decide that you want to vote on election day and go and vote, like that again is something that's like in the voters' hands. Like eventually, like when we can, make this change in Texas and get people elected who want everybody to vote, because quite just honestly, right now, the people in charge, our governor, lieutenant governor, and our attorney general, who get and keep their jobs by elections, don't want everybody to be able to participate. And so that's what we want to see a change in, is just the real true allowance of everybody who is eligible to participate, to be able to participate in voting. And that is allowing people to get registered to vote and vote the same day. Like, why not? Quite literally every other technology that we deal with is so much more advanced. And then voting is something that we want to, keep the technology back in the 1950s by moving a little abacus over to the left or putting a bean in a jar or something like that. It's like, ain't nobody trying to do all that, so math, keep me, I can't do math alone. It's dangerous. So yeah, we definitely, voting, the technology that comes with it, everything about voting should be more advanced, but it's not. And it's like the current lawmakers are trying to make it, as it was of the olden days. And so we need the technology, we need what it takes to vote to be able to be progressive and more inclusive for everybody to be able to participate in.
I mean, we should all be jealous we don't have same-day voter registration here in Texas. So like, it's like Colorado has it. Like they make it so they even mail out the ballots to every single individual like voting citizen, to be like, hey, this is who's going to be on your ballot. Could you imagine how much our lives would be easier if we had our government actually tell us who we get to vote for?
Instead of making it illegal, it's now illegal to proactively send people out ballots. Like, why is that illegal to do now? Like, who is that serving? You just have to ask yourself.
Serving those that are currently in power to continue to like just prevent any type of education to say like who's on your ballot, right? They just want to keep themselves in power. And with that being said, even too, is like we said, those three people, the governor, lieutenant governor, and AG, they're elected, but the one who actually administers our elections, the Texas Secretary of State, is an appointed individual by our state executive committee, or I'm sorry, state executive leadership. So like, we need to put pressure on these people to make sure we have the right person to conduct our elections here in the state of Texas, point blank.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, we should have a right to vote that person in, but at this time we currently don't. So we need to put the pressure on all the other individuals who can make the right decision, the right person with integrity to make sure that our election system works for the people, not the people working hard to find an election.
That part.
Absolutely. And any idea about the percentage of the electorate that's eligible to vote, that actually votes in our elections?
I don't know that recent number. I was doing some research, and what I did see, which is some good news, is that so in 2016 in Bexar County, the average age of the voting population was 43 years old, but the average age of a voter in 2016 was 63 years old. But then in 2020, Texas saw a 600% increase in youth voter turnout.
Right.
And so the potential is definitely there. It's just about getting the right communities activated to get out there. But I don't know the exact number. It's definitely not everybody who could be who is, that's for sure. We're definitely nowhere near that number yet. But 2020 was probably the closest that we got to it, like ever.
And so that's what you were speaking of when you, I think a comment was made earlier about voter suppression tactic that began to come out. That was after that 600% increase in youth voting.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
the domino effect, right?
and so for the next election, I saw a question here. Do we have to vote at specific locations?
Not in Bexar County. You can vote in any. So a couple years back, that's what it used to be. You'd have to vote in your specific precinct. There was a designated place that you had to, but they got rid of that. They have all these vote centers now that can literally take anybody who is a Bexar County resident, register to vote. You can vote at any polling site.
Yeah. Okay. Even on election day, you can still vote anywhere in your county.
Okay, outstanding. And so I'll pose this to each of you. What are the top 5 things to do as we approach the next election? Or just in general?
To vote. First thing you got to do is get registered to vote. Definitely make sure you are following Radical Registrars on social media. You want to, what else do we need people to do?
So after making sure that they are registered to vote, go ahead and find your sample ballot. So that's literally logging into Bexar Elections. You put in your information and it'll literally spit out who exactly you get to vote for this upcoming election, or what exactly you get to vote for. It gives you the specific verbiage of each proposition or whatever it may be that you get to vote on. And then unfortunately, like with most propositions, the language is very difficult to understand. It sort of reads like stereo instructions. So there are plenty of organizations like Radical Registrars and also us, Asian Texans for Justice, where we'll do our due diligence to put it in layman's terms, honestly, making sure that you understand it as a normal person, not speaking in stereo instructions. And then with that being said, it's just, you actually do it, right? You have all your resources, you have all your research, and you take your photo ID and you go straight to the polling station. The early voting, I think I have it, something, I don't know if you have it handy, Val, when early voting starts for the first May election.
Early voting is, okay, so for May 7th election, the early voting begins on April 25th to May 3rd. And then for the May 24th runoff election, early voting is May 16th. Yeah. And then the League of Women Voters, they also did a voter guide for the runoff election, and that is at lwvsa.org, and it's on the front page right there. And so with your sample ballot, you can pull that up and just literally look at these candidates in the runoff, circle who you want on your ballot, and take that in there with you to vote. But I mean, and the runoff is going to be way more condensed than the actual primary was, and so there will be less candidates on there, but still still, it pays to do your homework. It pays to vote informed, because you doing that prior, you can literally go in there, boop all your answers in, and get on out of there. And it takes you no time. Like, it's been a real joy to introduce these voter guides to people and then see them like go and vote with ease, like leave the booth feeling so confident and knowing that they just made informed decisions. I think that's been the best part of doing this, is like seeing the change that it makes, like having information to be able to vote informed and vote confidently. And so it really is just putting all those pieces together and just getting it done, and knowing that you've actually done something, like, what you've done when you've left, instead of walking out of there wondering what the hell the railroad commissioner is and what have you just done.
I mean, even with that being said too, is like, once you vote, when you're in and out, like, you'll notice, if we can get everybody to do that same thing, we won't have long lines at our election polling sites. Like, we won't have people scratching their heads or taking up time because they don't understand something on the ballot. If we all vote informed, we don't have long voting lines on it. I promise you, it'll make it so much easier, not only for you, but all the hundreds of people that are behind you that day or whatever. It'll go quick because you're like, boom, 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 boom. That's it. I'm on my way.
Yeah.
We can make it happen, y'all. We just need to vote informed.
It's a group effort.
Well, we thank you both so much. We're going to give you an opportunity to give a closing remarks about your organizations, how folks can get in touch with you, how the community can support the work that you're doing, how we here at 100 Black Men can support your work. We definitely want to partner. We love what you're doing. We love your passion and gift for the community. So just keep doing what you're doing. You got to do this. One last question I would ask is, when should we start talking to our children about voting?
Today, now.
Yeah, now.
Yesterday.
It should be one of those things, like when I'm talking to high schoolers, I'm being honest with them. Like, I literally left school on my 18th birthday and went and got a tattoo and then came back to school. And it's like, so like, I want like young people to like be as excited to like vote as they are to do all the other things that you get to do when you turn 18. And so it's never too early to start talking to your kids about it, and then being that example for them. Take them with you to go and vote, like show them, like, look, I got all mine written down right here. They over there struggling a little bit. We know who we voting for. Go in there, show them, just being that example for them, because so many people, you just don't know what you don't know. And like Nicolette said, like, this was something that seemed like a secret, like she didn't even know her parents were, doing. And so just having those conversations early and being like, you so excited to be grown and turn 18. Well, then make sure you're voting too, or then you still want people making decisions for you, because that's really what it is. You're excited to be grown and nobody make choices for you. Then why not participate in voting?
Love it. Yeah. And so as we get ready to close out, I'm putting a survey in the chat that I would ask everyone to take. This video is going to be available on TAN TV, and I believe it's going to be available on Facebook as well for our listeners to go back and listen to again, share with your friends. We'll put the survey in the comment section at Facebook and on TAN TV as well. So help us out. Give us some feedback by taking that survey. We really, really appreciate it. I'm going to open the door right now for our audience. I know we have a couple of board members on the call tonight. Any words, comment from our board members? We have our president and chairman of the board.
Well, I tell you, I apologize for coming a little bit late. It's a busy time of the year for everybody, but outstanding. The discussion that was led, the energy and excitement. I mean, that's what we all have to have with this election process. Because if that's what helps to create an infectious attitude with the whole process there. Because if we don't have that energy, then people don't think we care, which is not true. And we appreciate what you're doing and how you're doing it. As the 100 has been very strong in the involvement with voter registration, the participation in the political process, maintaining a very nonpartisan perspective, because we are a 501c3 organization. We have to understand the environment that we're in and make sure that the candidates that can do the right thing are doing the right thing. So again, thank you for your energy and your excitement and being with us here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, I would definitely just second that and really appreciate a variety of things that you touched on tonight, talking about really just engaging the citizenry. Like, how is it that you get people aware? How do you reach them where they are? And how does that become something, in my mind, that's consistent, not just around election time, but always at the forefront of this is how it is that we are able to establish collective action for change. And we're building the capacity of youth to continue doing things that are going to allow us to be progressive in a transformative and positive way. And so I really appreciate the work that you're doing. And if, again, as Dr. Harris said, if there's ways that we can support in getting word out about different initiatives or events that are going on, we would welcome those opportunities.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Absolutely. I had the pleasure of participating in a racial equity forum put on by the San Antonio Area Foundation. We're getting ready to graduate in May, but it's an initiative about breaking down barriers between the Black and Brown communities. And so if you guys ever want to join coalitions and get together and have a citywide Black and Brown voter education registration event, you want to partner with the 100 Black men, we'll try to help make it happen. And so, because we know we got to do a better job of spreading this knowledge, getting that information out there. And if we could use our platform to help make it happen, then, we got a very active board. They work their fingers to the bone, but, one more event might not hurt.
Yeah.
So I will open the floor up to you all. I don't know who went first last time. I believe Val. So Nicolette, I'll let you go first. Closing statement. How can our audience and listeners learn more about your organization? What assistance do you need? How can we help? All of that stuff.
Absolutely. I appreciate that. Again, thank you everybody for being with us tonight. I know we kind of did go over time, but it was engaging conversation. It was something that we really are passionate about. And we hope that everybody out there also listening and watching feels that same exuberance that we have, because we are young, but we're not going to be young forever. And so we do want to carry on this legacy, because that's what's deserving of our community. And that's what's deserving for the next generation to come. I personally don't have kids, but I know that I want to make this world a better place than I was given. And not to say that we're not given with things, but it's the idea that we're working towards progress. We're working towards a better community, better environment, better government that really should be there for us. It should not be the other way around. And like I said, the political power that we all have is so critical right now when we get to vote for the people that are supposed to be making our lives easier. And on behalf of Asian Texans for Justice, as I said, we're really brand new. We started literally, I think, in February of this year. And we came out of a time when it came out of a time, honestly, when it came out of the slain women from Atlanta who were, oh my gosh, I'm about to get a little bit emotional, but those slain Asian women in Atlanta, that we rallied the community together here in Texas to do a Stop Asian Hate rally in Austin. And from that has started Asian Texans for Justice, where we're fighting to make sure that our API community is seen, heard, and represented. And I'm honestly honored because I get to do this work here in San Antonio, although our API community is not as big, it's still robust in the sense of we have great Asian restaurants, community leaders. We have folks that, as much as you love our food, you need to love and respect us as community leaders and community members. So that's the voice that we want to continue moving forward. And I will say this past weekend, actually at Traders Village, San Antonio, there was Asian American, I think Asian Pacific Islander Hawaiian festival. I don't know if y'all saw that, but there was amazing Hawaiian dancers, Polynesian dancers. So as much as you love watching our community, our culture, make sure that you are looking out for your AAPI brothers and sisters in the community and making sure that they're heard. We still see in the news today that there are Asian folks who are being slain. There was one that really hit close to home for me, a woman in Yonkers, New York. That's where I was actually born. She was stabbed, I think, like 96 times in a store or something to that effect, where she was stabbed multiple times and suffered almost fatal injuries. Like, that does not need to happen. This type of hate does not need to happen in our community. And I know that us working with all our community leaders here in San Antonio and statewide, we need to look out for each other, and the solidarity that we bring to this it's going to shape how Texas look and how Texas progresses. So I appreciate the work that all of y'all have done with 100 Black Men in San Antonio, the amazing work that my friend Valerie Reifer gets to do with Radical Registrars. I laugh because she actually has me on roster sometimes. So I get to work as a Radical Registrar from time to time. But if you want to find more information about Asian Texans for Justice, we have a website, asiantexansforjustice.com. We're on Instagram and I believe Facebook. I'm not 100% sure, but Instagram for sure. And I will be happy to put my contact information in the chat as well. So if you have any additional questions or concerns, you can feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to be an ally for our Black and Brown community, but also at the same time, I want to work together so that way we can build up a community that really a community and leadership in this state that really represents all of us. Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Yes, thank you again for having us. Nicolette is so amazing. You see that she just has such amazing energy and just, she's just super duper passionate about this. So anytime I'm around her, it's always a great time and we're always getting stuff done and thinking of new ways to try to engage and empower the community. So thank you so much, Nicolette, for jumping on with us and sharing your knowledge and expertise with us and, letting us into what's going on, in the AAPI community. It's so important. And it really is a time for us to come together as one, as people of color. We really do need to come together and unify, to get something you've never had, you have to do something we've never done. So now is absolutely the time to join forces and to come together and really bring the communities together. So thank you so much, Nicolette, for that. But yes, we are at radicalregistrars.org. We have a website now that has a beautiful big yellow donate button that links to our Act Blue. We are always taking donations so we can continue doing our work that we're doing around the community. We are on Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn at Radical Registrars. Yeah, Radical Registrars on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And just please make sure you are getting registered to vote and make sure you are voting informed. Don't go vote alone. Take somebody with you to go and vote. Do your homework beforehand. The League of Women Voters, Voters Guides. Write down your answers. You can take a sheet of paper and you can take in the guidebook. You can vote informed. And so please make sure you're doing it. Now is the time where we can really make a big change in Texas and really feel these changes locally, quite literally feel real progressive changes that can occur just as long as we're participating. So thank you again for having us. And we would love to work with you guys in any capacity. We are all about community building leadership and uplifting young people and, the marginalized communities, because people are tired of being marginalized and are ready to be heard and represented. And so that's what we're looking to do.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you both again. We really, really appreciate it. And, I just say to our listeners and audience and people out there in the technology land, just imagine if we were to form Black and Brown coalition, voting coalitions, the collective capital of that vote, we would be the richest voting bloc in the nation.
Mm-hmm.
We would be the most envious too. We would be the most envious because we would get what we want. We would get the representation that we deserve. Yeah, absolutely.
Without question, because politicians respond to votes.
Yeah.
And you're exactly right. We would get what we want. They would have no other choice because they know they would get voted out. And so that's something to think about as we close the session tonight with Conversations with the 100. We're just elated that Val and Nicolette was able to join us. Thank you for all of our listeners. Please, please, please don't forget to take our survey. It's about a 30-second surveys, very, very short. Help us out to collect that information. But with that being said, we will close it out tonight and we'll see you next week. We have an event next week. We're going to be talking about violence prevention here on Conversations with the 100. Next Thursday, same place, starting at 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. And we look forward to seeing you then. And then on May 12th, May 14th, whatever that Thursday is, the second Thursday in May, we're going to have a segment on critical race theory. You don't want to miss that. And so we'll be putting more information out about that as well. But with that being said, if there's no other comments, we will close it out and you all have a great night.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.